formal introductions later, but we are very, very pleased that Chief Rabbi Mervis is with us today. He's on his way to Edinburgh, and he stopped here to give you a very special welcome and tell you how much it means to all of us that you're here. Chief Rabbi Mervis.
Thank you so much, Susan. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this most magnificent house of God, the pride not just of the Glasgow Jewish community, but the entire British Jewish community. And as you can see, this is a splendid synagogue, so treasured by us, and through the 140 years since services commenced in 1881, this synagogue has seen many very special occasions, and I'm so personally delighted this evening to be here to share in yet another historic event. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us here this evening. In particular, I would like to congratulate Susan Siegel and her team here at Garnet Hill Synagogue for leading the community, particularly during some very challenging times that we have just endured. And I'm sure you're all going to enjoy seeing the displays downstairs, which are absolutely extraordinary. So much work has been put into it. I was here nearly 2 years ago, seeing it midstream, and now to see the completed works is something indeed very special. Of course, we are all here for a very special purpose, for COP26. And seeing all of you here together this evening, from countries around the globe and from different faiths, I'm reminded of those great words in Psalm 133, Hinei matov u'mana'im shevet achim gam yachad. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to come together in peace. That's exactly what we are doing. But you know, the verse says, Matov u'mana'im. It is good and it is pleasant. Why are both terms necessary? And I think the reason is because sometimes you can have something that's good for you, but it's not pleasant. I can think, for example, of some medications. And then, on the other hand, there are many things which are pretty pleasant for us, but they're really not good. We shouldn't be doing them. But when people come together in a spirit of unity for the sake of the planet, it is good and it is pleasant. There is no downside to it. And then there's another question we have to ask. In the Hebrew it says, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. When people come together, also as well. This word also, gam, seems to be totally redundant. Who or what is it referring to? And in our Jewish tradition we say that the word also refers to God. Because when human beings come together in a spirit of peace for the sake of everyone on earth, God is also there in their midst. And how special it is that this event is taking place in this synagogue, this very special synagogue, this house of God, as a symbol of God's presence with us, and of the fact that our participation in COP26 for all of us is a sacred act. Yes, it is an integral part of our religions, of our faith, to care about God's word. You know, there are two verses which seem to contradict each other in the book of Psalms. In Psalm 24 we read, Lashem haaretz u'melo'ah. The earth is the Lord's and everything that is in it. Meaning God owns this world. Belongs to him. And then there is a second verse in Psalm 115. Hashamayim shamayim lashem va'aretz natan livnei adam. The heavens are the heavens of God, and the earth he has given to humankind. So on the one hand, this earth is God's. On the other hand, he's given it to us. What sense can we make of that? And there can be only one explanation, which is our Jewish traditional approach. and that is to recognize this earth is God's, that he has entrusted it in our hands. He has given it to us to sanctify it. We are his trustees, the guardians of this earth. We are the caretakers. And as a result, we have a responsibility to the earth itself. And that is why we are here in Glasgow. Because for us it's a sacred purpose to look after all of our earth, and not just the earth itself, but all people who happen to be upon this earth. Every single person counts. You know, one of the elements of the reality of the challenge facing us is the fact that it is people who are in the countries most likely to suffer because they are the most vulnerable, who are least able to do something about the environment crisis. And that therefore means that those of us who are able to do something have an added responsibility, not just for ourselves, but for people on the other side of the world. And this too is a religious concept. In the Jerusalem Talmud, the question is asked, what is the most important verse of the entire Bible? It's a great question. Rabbi Akiva famously answers, it's in Leviticus chapter 19, love your neighbor as yourself. What a wonderful answer. But Ben Azai, an associate of his, said, Rabbi Akiva, you are wrong. There is a verse which is more important than love your neighbor as yourself. It appears in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. It's the verse in which God tells us that every single human being on earth is created in his image. What Ben Azai was saying to Rabbi Akiva was, your verse, love your neighbor as yourself, means be selfless, be kind, engage in altruistic acts towards people who are your neighbor, members of your faith, or perhaps people who live in your location, part of your neighborhood. But said Ben Azai, there's a more important verse. It's the one which tells us that every human being is created in the image of God, wherever they happen to be, whether you know them or whether you don't, whether they're part of your faith or not. You need to reach out to one and all. You need to help. You have a responsibility for one and all. And, you know, the concept of the Talanoa dialogue comes from Fiji. And Fiji is an outstanding example of exactly what we are here to fight for. The Pacific island, in the event that global warming increases to unacceptable levels, which is already at an unacceptable level, but if it becomes an impossible level, the very existence of Fiji is in the balance. A country on the other side of the world, for us it must be like our own backyard. Whoever we are, wherever we come from. There's a fascinating law in Jewish tradition with regard to our kosher requirements. So we in Judaism, according to Torah law, we eat certain things, we don't eat other things. And in the book of Leviticus, we are told that the stork, which is called a chasidah in the Bible, is not kosher. So just in case anybody was interested in eating some stork, it's not kosher. Now the term that is used in the Hebrew Bible is chasidah. Chasidah means the pious one, the righteous one. What a beautiful name for a creature. The stork is the pious one. But if the stork is so pious, why is it not kosher? Why can't we eat it? And our tradition tells us that the stork is exceptionally kind, but only to birds of its own feather. Towards all others, it treats them with cruelty and disdain. So it might be kind, but its conduct is not kosher. That's not right. And similarly, for all of us, wherever we come from, as members of faiths that we represent, if all we're interested in is looking after our own, that's not kosher. It might be piety, but it's restricted, it's limited to our own circles. We all have a responsibility towards every single person on earth. And not only those who are here on earth now, but to all people in the future as well. 4 times in our Torah, we are told, in future times your children will ask you, saying, what is this about? And you must know the answers to teach them the ways of the Torah. And I believe in generations to come, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will pose the question to us and they will say, Mazot, what is this world that you have left for us? Why didn't you do something about it? That will be the great question that they might ask. Let's prevent them ever asking that. Let's do something now. Let's guarantee, together with everyone on earth, that we should be responsible. Responsible as people of faith, as a sacred act to protect and secure the welfare and well-being of God's earth, because that's why he placed us here within it. I'm humbled and privileged to be in your midst this evening, people who share this mission of life, as comrades in action, as partners, to guarantee that Shevet Achim Gam Yachad, as brethren dwelling together in partnership, may we indeed be blessed to make a positive impact on our environment, together with all delegates from all nations who have come here to Glasgow, so that as a result of COP26, our earth will be saved. Thank you very much.
Are we okay now? No. All right. Is it me? So we're all turning around. It's the first time today I didn't have to move the chairs.
Musical chairs, folks.
Well, as Chief Rabbi said, thank you all for coming. We're absolutely thrilled and delighted that you have made this your spiritual home for the next few hours. And we're very pleased that he was able to stop here on this way. It's been a very busy few days for him. And we're really happy that he could stop and send his message to you. So, on behalf of Garner Synagogue and the Jewish community, we welcome you to our home. I have a tiny bit of housekeeping, first of all. I think we need to, maybe if someone could ask him to stop. Thank you. So please make sure that your phones are on silent. We really appreciate it. We understand there are times when you may have to receive an important phone call, but we appreciate your phone on silent. Also, please try to use your 4G if possible, because we do have limited bandwidth, particularly in this area. And we're live streaming. And so if we all start getting onto our internet, we may have trouble live streaming, and we really want to make sure that everyone at home is able to see us. The fire exits are out the front door and located downstairs at the end of the hallway. There is no fire drill planned. So if I scream very loudly, it's either because I stubbed my toe or it's a fire. Please try to maintain distance whenever possible. We know that all of you have been vaccinated. Thank you for that. We know that you've all tested negative, and we really appreciate you taking the effort for that. But please try to maintain social distancing, and please, if you could wear your mask, we would really appreciate it. We've been very fortunate so far. We have not had any cases of COVID in our synagogue, and we're really trying to hope that we keep that record. There are sanitizers located throughout the building, and there are also restrooms located throughout the building. There are volunteers here, and people are probably lurking and hanging over your shoulder and asking whether you need something. We're here to help you. We're here to make sure that this is a very enjoyable event for you. And if you're new to Glasgow,
then please make sure that you ask the volunteers for any information. They're all natives, and they're really, most of them are, and they're really happy to help you understand where it is to go. So now for the good stuff. Distinguished visitors, faith leaders, climate change experts, global advocacy champions, and my friends from Interfaith Scotland and Interfaith Glasgow. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a privilege for us to host this wonderful event just prior to the actual kickoff of COP26. The Talanoa Dialogue has historically been an opportunity to informally come together to take stock of where we are in relation to climate change and how we can learn from each other. If you look at the workshops this evening, you'll see there's a wide range of topics and representatives from many continents. So I certainly echo what Rabbi Mervis said. We're so very pleased you came to Glasgow, and so very pleased you came to visit us. Allow me for a minute to share our spiritual home with you. It's 143 years old. It's twice as old as I am and in much better shape. It's a grade A listed building, and it's maintained with the generous support of benefactors, the Scottish Government, and various faith organizations. We have services every week, and we celebrate every major holiday. So if you're ever in Glasgow again on a Jewish holiday like Hanukkah or Yom Kippur, please join us. We'd love to have you. Please take a few minutes to walk through this magnificent building, as it is also the home of the Scottish Jewish Heritage Center. That is the repository for artifacts and archives related to the history of Jewish immigrants and other refugees. And we have a number of people here tonight that are familiar with downstairs, and they're happy to show it to you. Hopefully you enjoyed a musical taste of Scotland as you came into the building. It's always thrilling for me to hear bagpipes. You probably figured out I'm not from here originally. So our city is ready for you, and please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your stay comfortable while you're here. My grandmother was a very wise old sage. She lived to a very old age. She left me a legacy of her wisdom. So if this week is overwhelming to all of you and you feel a loss of energy, please remember her advice. Eat something, you'll feel better. It now gives me great pleasure to turn you over to Lindsay Taylor, who is the chair of Interfaith Scotland and the regional manager of the Muslim Engagement and Development Organization. I am pleased to be a member of her board and sincerely appreciate her partnering in our events and sessions. I have learned much about her religion and always appreciate her willingness to answer my stupid questions. Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that lovely introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here this evening. We are delighted as Interfaith Scotland to be partnering with this event this evening, right at the beginning of COP26. We are absolutely delighted that so many brothers and sisters, distinguished guests, are able to join us. It's not just the launch of COP26, though, it's also the launch of Interfaith Week as well. We had our launch in George Square today, and we are really honoured that we're continuing on with this programme of events into this evening's event as well. And we know that we'll also continue, as will COP26, with a programme of events across the week and the coming weeks to come. So, with no further ado, I would like to welcome brothers and sisters, honoured guests, religious leaders. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and please be welcome. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Valerian Bernard. I'm with the Brahman Maries, and I'm very happy to welcome you as well. This has been an amazing journey. We have been working all year long, basically, to be together here tonight, and it was a wonderful way to be welcomed by the Chief Rabbi and also by Susan. They have made this home our home in such an open-hearted fashion that we really feel blessed. And it's been the tradition of this Talanoa dialogue that we've had for 3 years as a platform for all people of faith to come together and be able to spend some enriching time where they can share their advocacy, where they can share their work, where they can share their spirit, but also where they can regenerate, because we are doing a very tiring job. And it's wonderful to be able to be together and feel the warm spirit of brotherhood. For the Brahma Kumaris, we understand that everything takes root in awareness and consciousness. So to be together allows us to actually open up to a new dimension of awareness. And definitely we need God's help to solve the equation. And definitely we also need each other to do the work we need to do. So it's a privilege really tonight, in the name of the Interfaith Liaison Committee, with my colleague Henrik, who's sitting very humbly at the back there. He's been leading with a group of people here, so I would ask Maureen to stand up, Lindsay to stand up, and all those who have been part of these long calls that we've had. And please, Jamie, also. So, welcome in the name of all of us, and please make this moment a special platform. It's your space, but also the world needs your love. The world needs our peace. The world needs the spiritual space from which we all coming from, to bring this energy of acceptation of what is and turn it into hopefully what will be tomorrow, and let it be a good place that we will share together with all humanity. So without further ado, it's my privilege to call Amanda. Are you here, Amanda? Come, please. So we have here a number of distinguished guests, and I will first give the word to Paul Baker. He's representing the Quakers, and he's been doing an amazing work here in Britain. They've done a lot of awareness raising, and he will probably tell you more about it. So please go ahead.
Hello everybody. I'm Paul Parker, and I'm the recording clerk of Quakers in Britain, the senior staff member for our small community of faithful people who believe there can be heaven on earth and that we have to build it ourselves together. That means that for us, the idea of living sustainably and peacefully together on this planet is core business. It matters to us because we recognise that there is something of the divine in every person. So something which causes one of us to suffer diminishes us all. This has led Quakers to work for climate justice, for a response to climate change which does not punish those least responsible. It led us here in Britain in 2013 to divest from fossil fuels and to campaign against fracking for shale gas. It leads us to call for reparations for loss and damage, and for far-reaching changes to the economic system which has brought us all to this point. We can talk about individual behaviour changes, and many Quakers have made changes to their homes and their lifestyles, but a response to climate change which has justice as its heart has to be about systems, about what we can all do, not just what I can do. It leads us to use Quaker processes to work at the United Nations, as well as to pin our hopes to quiet processes and small circles, and to send people here to COP. It leads us to protest and to civil disobedience and to lobbying of parliamentarians, as well as to dialogue, collaboration, and personal commitments. And we know that our actions are not yet enough. This evening I want to say something about hope. At heart, this COP26 is a hopeful event. It carries the hope of multilateral agreement, of cooperation between peoples, It brings hope that we can act together for the common good, the hope of the worst averted, the hope of support to the nations and people most deserving of it. We can hope for mitigations, for climate finance, for adaptations, and crucially for loss and damage finance, support for those worst affected by a crisis which is not their fault. We can hope that their voices, though poorly represented here in Glasgow, will be heard. We can hope for urgent action from our governments. We can hope for an end to fossil fuel subsidies. We can hope the oil will be left in the ground unburnt. We can hope for carbon budgets that bring emissions down so we have a good chance of capping global warming at 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Even that means big changes to our world. But the difference between that and 2 degrees, or the barely imaginable consequences of 3.5 or 5 degrees if we do nothing, means we can hope for action that will limit the rise to 1.5. These are big hopes, but surely we have a right to hope. I'm realistic that these hopes may not be fulfilled at this COP. That makes me sad and angry, but I refuse to be hope-free. I want to enter into this COP in good faith, full of hope. These multilateral processes are the best chance we have to reach a global consensus around climate governance. The thought that won't leave me, though, is that I am part of a generation which can still hope for these things. We still have that chance. We know and understand the science. We can avert untold suffering and conflict. We can change how the system we have created works. We have the multilateral processes, imperfect as they are, through which our hopes could be met. We have the resources, the technology, the innovators we need. But unless this COP sets us on the right path, we may be the last generation allowed to hope. The last generation to be able to see a path which leads to a just settlement, to a future which allows us to live peaceably with one another on this beautiful planet. The thought of a generation who may be denied that hope terrifies me. We will be judged on our actions. We have to be accountable to those who are going to be most affected for our response, even though those future generations are not yet here in countries like the UK. And there is a terrible risk of complacency, of fatalism, of resignation to what seems inevitable, which so far has been the West's response, while people in the global south are already suffering. How dare we? We must not rest, but commit to righting the wrongs of centuries of racist history. As a Quaker, I live my life in the belief that there is an inward voice, a guiding spirit which prompts me to act. I have faith that we can be led to solutions. I have faith that there is a loving way through this. I refuse to be fearful, but the thought of those who come after us losing their right to hope fills me with righteous fury. We cannot and must not let that hope-free future happen. That's what brings me here, hopefully, to Glasgow, to stand alongside you all, to hope and to work together to build a hopeful heaven here on this earth we share.
Thank you so much, Paul, for bringing the whole capacity of changing our lifestyles, our civilization, the way we do business, the way we don't really care for others. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure now to present you with Amanda Cron. She's an amazing person working for the OHCHR, which means the High Commissioner's Office of Human Rights. And she has a message on human rights and climate change for us. I'm really happy to have her with us. She also graced us with her participation in Madrid, so
Thank you very much. And it's very nice to be back here in Glasgow with all of you. I will say just a few words about the linkages between human rights and climate change in the context of the work that we do at the UN Human Rights Office. And I think it will actually resonate quite strongly with a number of the points that have already been made by speakers prior to me. So, of course, we've seen already in many ways and across the globe the ways in which climate change impacts human rights. The right to food, the right to health, the right to work, the right to life itself. And this is something that the High Commissioner herself has also highlighted, including in her most recent opening statement to the Human Rights Council in Geneva, that focused specifically on the environmental crisis and the impacts that it has on human rights. So the climate crisis and its interconnections with biodiversity loss as well as pollution. Of course, the impacts that climate change itself has on human rights is one element, but another important element is what in our responses and our ways of addressing the climate crisis to make sure that those responses are grounded in and founded upon human rights as well. And that includes ensuring that climate action is inclusive, making sure that climate action is participatory, and that it ensures strong and robust safeguards that are environmental safeguards, but also social safeguards, that there's access to justice and independent grievance mechanisms, that there's protection for environmental human rights defenders that we know are often in a particularly vulnerable situation. So all of this combined links into the climate change and human rights nexus and are some of the issues that we're trying to work on at the Office of the High Commissioner. I was thinking, just as the previous speaker was mentioning, the importance of hope, and I guess two messages of hope that I can bring from Geneva comes from two recent decisions of the Human Rights Council, where the Council, as many of you might perhaps already know, have recently both adopted a resolution recognizing the right to healthy environment, and also decided to establish a dedicated mandate, an independent expert, special rapporteur, that will work on the implications of climate change on human rights. So this is a very strong signal from the Human Rights Council, the human rights body within the international system, that the climate crisis and human rights are intertwined, and we need to ensure that our responses to the climate crisis and that our climate action is founded in human rights. So I think I will leave it at that just for these brief opening remarks, but again, it's very nice to be here with all of you, and I look forward to the discussions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Maria. Actually, the discussions will be part of the Little Talanoa dialogues that we're going to have afterwards. So there will be a group on human rights and climate change. As was said earlier, the whole concept of Talanoa comes from the islands of Fiji, where this is the way people solve big crises, by asking themselves and their peers the question around what's now, what do we want in the future, and how do we get there? So I hope you all enjoy the conversations later, but I would like now to introduce Reverend Mark Strange. He is going to share with us a message.
I'm going to tell you a story.
Great.
That's what when I read the briefing, that's what it seemed to me that was part of what it was about. Just to introduce myself, I'm Mark Strange. I'm the Bishop of Murray, Ross and Caithness, which basically means everything north of Perth for the Scottish Episcopal Church, and I'm the Anglican Primate for Scotland. And I have sat now through many speeches, and I'm now getting quite sleepy, so the food thing sounds really good. I'm also renowned for telling stories, because I can give you all sorts of lovely, deep theological statements, but actually I want you to think how these things affect you. And I take all the comments, but we're all here to be activists. We're all here to push the point. But what we said in our interfaith statement was, it also affects us. I'm just going to tell you the brambles story. Hands up if you know what a bramble is. Excellent. Right. Those of you who don't, it's a blackberry. All right? For me, it's a bramble. And I live in the middle of nowhere. Literally, there are 3 houses and 1 church. I don't even look after the church. Another priest comes and does that for me. And I live there with a beautiful view of Ben Wyvis. I have the whole of Manlochi Bay opening beneath me. I have the view down to the Mondelez Mountains. And I'm in a diocese which is where everyone in the whole of the UK and the world wants to visit. And we really rejoice in that, unless you're all bringing a caravan. I live about 200 metres off the A9. If you don't know where the A9 is, it's the road that basically runs from Thurso in the far north down all the way down to Stirling. Famously mentioned in Skyfall, the James Bond film. And I live at the end of a track which goes on to the A9. And for the 12 years I lived there before lockdown, I was brambleless. Because every bramble bush at the end of the track had inedible brambles on it. They were small, they were not good, and I saw at first hand just how grim they had to be to live that close to the A9. And remember, this is the A9 in the Highlands, not a huge number of cars. And then we had lockdown. And after a very short space of time, I dutifully, taking my rubbish down to the wheelie bins, to the recycling bin and to the other bin, in a wheelbarrow, so I didn't use the car, very good, suddenly looked into the bushes. And within a year, the brambles on my track were the biggest and the juiciest and the best I have seen in years. And I'm delighted to tell you, if I'd only thought about it, I could have brought you some to have with all the other food. I've got bramble jelly, I've got bramble gin, I've got bramble everything. Can I let you into a secret? I won't have any this year. Because in the brief period it has taken for the A9 to go back to its normal lifestyle, the brambles are minging. They are just not good. And I won't be eating a single one. Now, I know that seems completely minuscule compared to all the other issues that we hear about. But actually, if I, living in a community where I don't have the chance to have many of the grid things that other people have, you know, everything I put in has to go into a tank and everything I take out has to come many miles. It does matter what you and I do. It does matter that we're here and we're going to make a lot of noise, and that's brilliant. I like a lot of noise. But actually, politicians said to me a long time ago, you want to reach zero rates, you can shout at us as much as you like, but you have to change what you do. So, do I want my children and the neighbouring children who, when they saw us picking the brambles, said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Picking brambles." And they said, "What are those?" So this is about the future. So I need us to be shouting and advocacy and hope and all those things, but don't do it at the expense of what you do. The changes we all have to make. No good shouting at other people, as I point out regularly to the people who pay my house bills. I'm still driving a manky old diesel, and it's an oil tank that heats my house. Make the most of these 2 weeks. But don't kid yourselves that it doesn't mean that you have to do something significant with your own lives to make sure that when you pin down a politician, you do it with a conscience that says, I also am trying. I don't want a world without brambles.
Thank you so much, Bishop, for bringing the brambles to us. It was my first encounter with brambles. And for bringing nature into the room, you actually did it beautifully. With every step you do has an impact. It is my pleasure now to introduce a dear friend, I would say. We have met before. His name is Reverend James Bacon. He's an amazing speaker. He comes all the way from the Pacific Conference of Churches, and he's going to tell us about what climate change looks in his part of the world and what his concerns are, and whatever else he wants to. Please go ahead.
I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share with you. And that is what Talanoa is. It is sharing of stories, as we have heard. It is sharing of our hearts, our dreams. It is sharing of our fears, listening and speaking to each other. In a real Talanoa, everyone here would get a chance to speak. And we would not finish until everyone has a chance to speak. But if we did that, my sister would chase me out of here. We have things to do, and there will be time to talk downstairs. I'm very grateful to Chief Rabbi who spoke to us today, because he basically said all the things that I needed to get said and done out of the way. Right? He spoke on my behalf, which was great. Talked about Talanoa. Talked about the vulnerability of the Pacific. The fact that our carbon footprint for a third of the world's surface is no bigger than the nail on your small toe of carbon footprints. So, like my elder brother before me, I will tell a story. I wear this cross, and this evening or this afternoon, a lot of people have asked me about it, admired it. I'm sure some of those who admired it were hoping that I would give it to them, but I can't. And the reason I can't is because this cross was given to me on the occasion of my being elected as General Secretary of the Pacific Conference of Churches. But it was given to me specifically from my wife's family. And my wife, among many other ethnicities, has very strong connection, blood relations to the islands of Kiribati, known in colonial times as the Gilbert Islands. Maybe named after a rugby club, I don't know. But each of these shells, maybe like the brambles, were collected by my nieces and nephews and tied together with string, tied together to a mat that was woven in the shape of a cross. And this is the simple way in which the people of Kiribati make their jewelry. No diamonds, no gold, no silver, just small cowrie shells. And I wear this because they may not be able to do this for much longer. Because Kiribati is a poster child of sea level rise. Someone was sharing that they had watched the documentary Anote's Ark. This is the reality of my people of the Pacific. But you don't just have to go to Kiribati, a low-lying coral atoll, or to the Marshall Islands where the young envoy has been speaking. You can come to Fiji with its volcanic islands that experience extreme weather phenomena that used to go generations before we had them in Category 5. Where even in places like Fiji, communities are forced to already be relocated because of sea level rise, saltwater inundation. And I'm not here to ask the question why, because you all know the answer. And 2 weeks ago, I met with the president of the Human Rights Council, who is from my country, to say thank you, because we have now this special rapporteur on human rights and climate change. But beyond the human rights perspective, our Pacific people have a deep spiritual relationship with the land and with the sea. The practice of living is shalom with land and with sea. Salam, peace, living in harmony. And for generations, we have been told that that is not the way to live. That is backward. That is ignorant. Because that is what colonization did to us. And now, this is what the world is calling for. Today, twice I heard from what we call Psalm 24 in the Christian tradition, the book of Psalms. I heard it here, the first verse of Psalm 24. I heard it at the vigil. The earth is the Lord's and all thereof, all that is in thereof. But it's not the first time I came across it this week. On Friday, when I arrived into the UK, I flew into Heathrow, and I went straight to London, got off the train at outside the Bank of England. And as I sat waiting for the National Climate Change or Climate Justice Memorial that was being held, and to support our Pacific climate warriors, these young people from the Pacific who are our faces and our voices, our young people, our children who are not, as they say, not drowning but fighting. I sat there and I was looking at all the police around it. And in my experience with police, these were very polite people. It was very nice. But as I said, I looked up at this Royal Exchange, Royal Stock Exchange, the Bank of England, all of this. And at the top of the Royal Exchange were the words that we heard today. The earth is the Lord's, all therein. And I also say, how dare? How dare this be put at this site of capitalism, this palace, this edifice that glorifies greed, that continues to dig, extract from the land at the cost of so much. Today also we heard about loving neighbor as loving God. And whenever I hear that, I also go to the old story of the two brothers, the first story of brothers in the Bible. When God asks Cain, who has murdered his brother, "Where is your brother?" Cain responds, "Am I my brother's keeper?" So today, as we have seen the beginning of COP, we prayed together as communities of faith, as people of spiritualities that call for life in abundance and all life, not just human life. As we hear talk of climate finance and the 100 billion that needs to be raised, committed to, and all the other things that we are hearing, I ask the question, particularly when we ask who will pay for the relocation of our people? Who will pay for the costs of what we need to do in order to survive? Who will support us in our quest not only for life in abundance, but dignity as a human right, peace and justice? Just two questions I have for you. Who is my neighbor? And are you my keeper? Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing your people to the table tonight with such eloquence and love. It's my pleasure to introduce to you someone who's not sitting there. She's hiding somewhere. I'm calling the Reverend Mary Valjaka. She is from the indigenous peoples of Finland, and she is going to bring the indigenous people to us. As many of you already know, many people from the south couldn't come, and so she will be their voice. Even though she is an indigenous from the north, she is very much indigenous. So thank you for being with us and for bringing them to us tonight. Because we talked about vulnerability, we talked about people who had little responsibility, so thank you.
Hi, so my name is Mari Valjakka, and I'm a school Sami from Finnish Sapmi. In Japan, they have this saying that if you want to catch a fish, please plant a tree. I think this is a very good saying, and I think it's a very sustainable saying. Well, I don't live in Japan. Actually, I live in Sapmi, in Finnish side of Sapmi, and my home is 300 kilometers to north from Arctic Circle line. So we have a very, very beautiful nature in there, but you need to remember that when going to Arctic, the nature is also very, very sensitive. And extremely sensitive even for slightest changes in the weather whatsoever. So from my context, I would like to say that before you do anything, please plant a tree and look how slowly it grows, or if it even grows. Protecting the creation is very central mission to the churches. These days, Sami people is witnessing various interests to use our natural resources that are located in Sami homeland. We think that the development of the Arctic area must be sustainable in ways that do not threaten the environment or the traditional life that Sami ancestors have enjoyed for centuries. There's no climate justice if there's no justice for indigenous peoples. Many people like to say that we live in the middle of the wilderness, but I try to avoid the term wilderness because it sounds something that doesn't belong to anyone, or it's not, necessary to protect that. But for us, the wilderness is our homeland, and our homeland is not wasteland. It's not just waiting there to be used and abused. For us, the wilderness is the nature, and the nature is sacred. It is our shelter, our church, our home, source of life for every creature of God that lives here. In the Arctic, the ice is melting, and like we just heard, in the Pacific, the sea levels are rising. Indigenous brothers and sisters from Pacific to Arctic, from Amazons to Asia,
we're facing these impacts. And like my sister Greta Thunberg from Sweden like to say, there's no planet B. And I would like to say that indigenous people, we think that we have the wisdom how to live in connection with the creation, with the planet A, with our Mother Earth. So please, let us share this wisdom with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the numbers that stays in my mind is how the little population of indigenous people has been taking care of 80% of the biodiversity of our planet. And so the task that they're actually doing is providing life for all of us, and in such a humble and dignified fashion. So yes, this knowledge is so valuable to all of us. My pleasure now is to present you with someone who's working a lot with advocacy. Fijian has been a great presenter for many years with Islamic Relief, and she's going to talk to us from the perspective of her organization on loss and damage and finance. Please go ahead, Fijian. Well, it's yours. Word is yours.
So from the Islamic tradition, we say Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you all. It is a pleasure to be here today. I'd like to thank the speeches of Rabbi Mervis and my brothers and my sisters today. It's a pleasure to stand here in front of you all on this wonderful occasion. And I think why I'm here, and I know God works in mysterious ways, and through this occasion it was through Valerian, and I feel as though I'm here because I am representing all those people who could not make it, who couldn't get their visas to be in this country, who couldn't get onto flights, who couldn't find hotels. And it's really, really important to understand that when we are at COP26, the people that we represent, we are those voices that are here today. And it's disheartening to see all the things that have happened for those individuals not to be here today. And for those individuals, you know, it's a difficult space for me to kind of think about that I'm here representing them. I also want to talk about what's happening around the world. And I bring you a story from Khadija in Pakistan, who for the last 70 years has said, I've had to move 4 times. She is what we call a climate migrant. Her space, her coastal area, mass desertification. Her and the generation after her are having to constantly move from rural areas into urban areas. Or like my sister, Noor, in Bangladesh, who is most of the times waiting for the next monsoon or the next seasonal hurricane. 163 million people live in Bangladesh. And most of Bangladesh will be underwater. And like my brother before, we spoke about the Pacific Islands too. Then I speak about my sister, Tandeo, in Mali, who's had to endure climate migration. And somebody earlier spoke about the human rights around the nexus of climate change, of poverty, of war, and also climate change. So the message that I come to you today with is, you know, as Muslims, we are compelled by our religion, not only spiritually, but morally, that we care for our community and our communities. It's not widely known that actually there is a deep and long-standing connection between Islamic teachings and environmentalism. As a person of faith, I see our planet as a gift, and we have the sacred responsibility to care for protect the Earth's climate, not just for now, but for future generations. Many of our faiths spoke here today, and they shared one golden rule, and that was treat others as you wish to be treated. And this is what I heard today. One of the questions I was asked is, what are you hoping from this COP? And what I'm hoping is hope, solidarity, as we are here today, and ambition. So the moral dilemma here is, my dear brothers and sisters, that those in power, in their responses, there has been inadequacy, and we know that. Action has been delayed, even as the voices of faith communities, our voices have become stronger, because we are deeply concerned about the inaction on climate protection and outraged over the injustices, from fossil fuel extraction, for those who speak on divestment, and we need to continue to challenge on so many fronts. Everybody has said that today. And the striking note, as my brother before me spoke, is that developed nations have to come forward and realize that 100 billion, and I believe that that 100 billion should be in new money and not the old money that has been promised. That finance commitment is needed now more than ever. The vision that we would like to see is a plan. The plan to see poorer countries being invested in, and on top of that, being scaled up for adaptation. You know, when the Paris Agreement shifted this focus to voluntary action, my dear friends, that voluntary action has humanitarian implications, situation where the most vulnerable are the most impacted and are being pushed into further uncertainty and poverty. The time has come for all of us to show true leadership in our faith communities, for an urgent plan of action. Just like the politicians and the governments are making their plans of action, we also have to step up and make our plans of action. Actually, we have to do that by 2023 because we will have global stocktake by then. Ultimately, my dear friends and my dear brothers and sisters, this is the greatest political issue of our time. This is about power dynamics, and whether that is on vaccine equity as we've just come out of the pandemic, or the redistribution of the 100 billion, we need to continue to ensure that making sure that climate justice is central to that. The challenges, my dear brothers and sisters, will be many, but I can tell you the opportunities will equally be as many. The ultimate aim, which is an advocacy thing, is a post-carbon economy, making sure that our call, our brothers and sisters in this room, is that we want a balance and we want equality. We do not want unbalanced distribution and inequality, which is an artificial, arbitrary narrative. So in answer to your question, Barry, and the one that you gave me is, what is it that we want from COP? We want the money, we want the plan, we want the economy, and we want distribution, and we want justice. You got that? Thank you.
I want to thank all of you and Jackie. You're always so inspiring. We actually heard a lot just now, and in order to reflect and let it sink in, we're going to hear a song made by the Franciscans. It's a little song that's really powerful, and I wish you to enjoy the spirit with which it's made of nature, and to also contemplate everything, every bit of wisdom that has been shared with us just now. After this, my two friends who were hiding earlier on, Budi Tiranko from the Franciscans, as well as Alexandra from Sokayakai, will explain the bit on the Talanoa dialogues, how we're going to work out these conversations that Reverend James was telling us about. Everyone will be able to share what they think and their feelings. Thank you so much.
Llora cada gota de agua de tus manantiales. Llora cada gota de agua de tus manantiales. En tus entrañas gritan montañas tan maltratadas. Se escucha el clamor de la selva siendo devastada. Se escucha el clamor de la selva siendo devastada. Vida, tierra, que se oiga tu voz, que los corazones recuerden de nuevo el amor. Vida, tierra, canta tu canción. Quiero ver tu danza de vida llena de color. Miles de especies viven el drama de su extinción. Toda vida mala en cada creación nace del amor. Toda vida mala en cada creación nace del amor. Abandonado de los pobres se oye tu dolor. Un clamor de auxilio que pide tan solo inclusión. Un clamor de auxilio que pide tan solo inclusión. Vida, tierra, que se oiga tu voz, que los corazones recuerden de nuevo el amor. Vida, tierra, canta tu canción. Quiero ver tu danza de vida llena de color.
Amada Madre Tierra, nuestra casa común, amada Madre Tierra, nuestra vida eres tú. Gracias por el bosque, gracias por el agua, gracias por la selva y por la montaña. Amada Madre Tierra, vamos regresando, vamos recordando nuestro ser esencial. Volver a la ley de origen, a la ley natural.
Any kind of respect and begging you to act, accepting the facts, we don't need to relax, yeah. Get out, please appreciate the landscape, species, the wind, the race, every mountain, every place. For the future that's bright and we all chase, using opportunities or losing it in our days. Make every day a better day on planet Earth, every plant, every animal, and every bird. Toda criatura en su existencia vibra en armonía. Hay plena alegría en cada ser vivo, un canto a la vida. Vida, tierra, que se oiga tu voz, que los corazones recuerden de nuevo el amor. Vida, tierra, canta tu canción. Quiero ver tu danza de vida llena de color. Vida, tierra, que se oiga tu voz, que los corazones recuerden de nuevo el amor. Vida, tierra, canta tu canción. Las tierras cansan como una esencia de Dios. Las tierras cansan como una esencia de Dios.
So thank you very much. So the song is created specifically for this COP26 by the Franciscan family. And this song is about listening to the forest, but also to thank to the Mother Earth. So that's a song that you can find it also in the YouTube. Before we continue, I think we would like also to announce that for our sisters and brothers who are Muslim, there is a specific prayers room downstairs in which you can use the 2 rooms downstairs for the prayers now. And then there's also the 2 places, the 2 toilets where you can do the ablution. So the room is available downstairs. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. We are now going to move into the small group discussions. So for some of you who registered online, you chose your group. Some of you who chose when you entered the room. And Valeriane explained the spirit of the Talanoa dialogue, but just to give you in brief, we would like to, so in each group there will be a facilitator and or two, and each group then will appoint a rapporteur or two. And the discussion will follow those three questions. Where are we now in relation to the topic of this session? Where do we want to go and how do we get there? And with the points that will be collected, the rapporteurs will take the points, 1, 2, 3 points maximum, and we will gather these points into the Talanoa dialogue call that will be then delivered to the UNFCCC. And for the rapporteurs, you can give the points that will be either on post-its, on piece of papers, to the facilitators of the group who will just gather everything. And before we're going to now announce the timing and the groups, we have many friends following online the live broadcast, so hello everyone. And they are now also going to join, it's going to be time for you to join the small group discussions on Zoom. So there are also more than 100 people joining on Zoom, different groups as well.
So thank you, Alexandra. And once again, you remember when you come in, you have the badge with your name and your group. So please remember about your group. And now we will discuss, or we will share with you where to find your group. So I have to join some Alexandra because we have only one paper.
Okay, so first group is What is Loss and Damage? And it's going to be moderated by Shannon Shah, who is going to be, is just there. And you are meeting downstairs in room 1. So everybody who is loss and damage, downstairs, room 1.
And the group 2 will be about the wisdom of indigenous people that will be facilitated by Maureen and Mary. That will be upstairs, top of the stairs. Upstairs, top of the stairs.
Then group 3 on advocacy and climate action. It's going to be facilitated by Adrian Shaw, and it's going to be on this floor, front left, in this room, front left. One of these.
The fourth group, I'm a bit too small as you see. The fourth group is on climate science that will be led by Lindsay. Lindsay is here. So it's going to be upstairs on the balcony left. Upstairs, balcony left. Follow Lindsay.
Then the next group is Gender Inclusive Climate Action. It's going to be moderated by Mariana Leiter from ACT Alliance, who is here. And you are going to meet here, back right. Here, sorry, so front is here and back is over there. Right.
And then the next group is about finance for climate actions that is going to be facilitated by Julius Batia. Julius is over there. And that will be here, back, left. So you follow Julius, here, back, left.
And then the next group is Building Strength and Resilience. So your name would be Building Strength. And this is facilitated by Maureen Goodman from the Brahma Kumaris, and you are meeting upstairs in the room. There is one room, upstairs in the room.
On the group, taking United Action, Global Governance and Climate Action. So you will see Global Governance. That will be led by Haldor Torgerson. Haldor Torgerson. He is here. Thank you. And then it will be upstairs, balcony, right. Upstairs, balcony, right.
Next group is Just Transition with Athena Peralta from the World Council of Churches, who is just over there. and you are meeting downstairs in room 1.
The next group will be 2 groups because we need to split into 2 groups. It's on the engagement of faith group in addressing the climate emergency. So it is called engagement of faith groups. The group 1 will be with Chilean. Oh, at the back. Group 2 will be with Kiara. And then the facilitator will be Rabbi Sakunovic. And the 2 group will be downstairs. The group 1 will be in room 3. The group 2 will be in room 1. Downstairs, group 1, room 3. Group 2, room 1.
It's
And Rabbi Mason, as well as the moderator.
the 2 facilitators, yes, Rabbi Saknovich and Rabbi Mason. And then we have the group on adaptation, which will be led by Jamie Williams from Islamic Relief. Jamie is over there. And you are meeting downstairs in room 2.
And then the last 2 will be human rights and the climate. It's going to be upstairs in the room with me. Upstairs in the room with me.
And young people participation and climate negotiations, it's with me and Savannah, and we are going to meet here, front right, here. And Savannah is just there, so we're going to meet together. So that's the groups. Yeah, at least you have the name of your group on your sticker, so at some point you'll find your group. But now, just to give you, just before we separate into the groups, it's now 6:20. So 6:20 p.m. and we have less than 1 hour because the interfaith service will then will start sharply at 7:20 here. So if you can just stop the groups to allow movement back into the main room for the interfaith service, that would be wonderful. Have great discussions.
Thank you.
Excuse me. You left my name as facilitator for the global. Yes.